And welcome to another episode of Experts Speak. I'm Michael DeLon. Today I'm talking with Claudia Scott. Claudia, thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you so much for inviting me and having, carving the time for doing this with me.
Well, you are welcome. So, Claudia is part of Startup Junkie, and you might remember a few months ago I interviewed their founder Jeff Amorine back in March. So, if you missed that episode, go back and listen to that because Jeff's got a great background, and Startup Junkie is an amazing organization that's really helping entrepreneurs, not just in Northwest Arkansas, but really around the country, and it's really cool what they're doing. And Claudia's with him, and Claudia's got this great background from growing up in Costa Rica. Now, for some reason, she lives in Arkansas. Um, but she really works with entrepreneurship, and we want to talk about entrepreneurship in the Hispanic speaking communities around the country. And let's dive into that. But first of all, Claudia, tell me, how in the
Yeah.
world did you get doing what you're doing today?
Yeah. Well, that is a long story, and I will try to make it as short as I can and hopefully interesting. But definitely, if somebody did miss that episode with Jeff, I 100% recommend them going back and checking that out. He's amazing, so funny, so interesting, lots of stories. Yeah, I was born and raised in Costa Rica. My family lives there. Still to this day, my nieces and nephews. But one thing I always wanted to do was to go to school abroad. So it's something that kind of I got an idea of it when I was like 7 or 8, and then I stuck to my plan most of my life. So I moved to Arkansas with the Walton International Scholarship Program, which is an international scholarship that the Walton Family Foundation has put on for, I think, close to 40 years. And it's for Central American students to move to Arkansas specifically, because this is where the Walton family is from. So I moved here with that in 2013, and I kind of studied business and communication. And I really thought I wanted to do banking. I thought that was going to be amazing and all I ever wanted, and I was going to have a very fulfilling career. And after a few years in banking, I realized it just was not for me at all. Like, I did not like the day to day. I was kind of feeling that hamster in the wheel situation, see no impact of, my hard work every day. And it was beautiful timing because I left that job right before COVID started. So I didn't know that was going to be a thing. Uh, and so, I quit that job and took about 6 months to really focus on charting a path for my future. So read a lot of books, did a lot of research, and kind of, all I encountered was find that intersection between the things that you love doing and you're passionate about and the things that you're actually good at. So that is easier said than done. It clearly took me a couple months, and I can talk your ear off, and I've never met a stranger, and I love helping people. So that felt kind of like the intersection between both of those things. And I took some jobs at nonprofits. I worked for the Bentonville Chamber. I worked for a migrant federally funded program. And then I finally joined Startup Junkie close to 2 years ago. I think it's going to be 2 years ago, maybe the end of this year. And I love it. Like you said, Startup Junkie doesn't just help people in Northwest Arkansas, in Arkansas as a whole. We help anyone nationwide, and we even have some programs in South Korea. Hopefully, we'll have some programs in Costa Rica at some point. But we're definitely an organization that they do it all, and we have a fantastic team. So that's kind of a little bit of how I joined Startup Junkie and in my life that's taken multiple turns.
That's awesome. That's a great journey, though, and kudos to you
Yeah.
for figuring out what you want to do in life and plotting a course and uh, putting yourself around other very successful people like Jeff and the team at Startup Junkies. So let's
Yeah.
let's dive in because I think that kind of plays into entrepreneurship in the Hispanic speaking communities. Let's unpack that for my audience and say where are these communities?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, clearly, we have a big number of Hispanic, citizens and people in the United States. And I'm not 100% sure of that stat, but I think it's a Hispanic entrepreneur. The data says that Hispanics are like 1 or 1.5 times more likely to start a business, especially in the United States. I'm not sure what the stat would be in Central America, but in the US, we are very likely to start our own business and kind of jump in that entrepreneur journey that can be quite hard and isolating. So sometimes we don't think about that group of our entrepreneurs needing help. So this is something that we've tried, at Startup Junkie. I was one of their first Spanish speaking hires. So there's definitely a need for our Hispanic entrepreneurs, not only for them to gain, access to workshops and training, but also capital. It's different with a language barrier. It's not as easy to
Yeah.
just Googling, okay, who can help me do this? Or how do, there's many more layers that we don't see. And I'd like to think that because I've gone through it, because I am, Hispanic, I was not born here, I can kind of empathize with the Hispanic business owners of Northwest Arkansas. So that's kind of how we've started in, getting to that group, reaching that group.
Yeah, well, it's really cool. It's really important actually because so I moved from Arkansas to Kentucky this year in May of this year, and we bought into a subdivision that's being built out. Right, they're building houses.
Yeah.
Do you want to just wager a guess the nationality of the people who are building the houses?
Yes,
They're
I would
they're
guess they're, yeah.
they're Hispanic, right? And the people who come in and paint the house, they're Hispanic, and which is amazing and great, and they're phenomenal. But here's where you can really, I think, help them and help us. We had an issue. We needed something like repainted, right? So we put our thing in, and I called the company, and it was challenging to hear what was being said because they
Yes.
weren't fluent. And then it was like, well, do they schedule? And they're like, well, we just have a guy come to you. And it's like, what? So helping them understand how to translate, because the work they do is phenomenal. Their work ethic is, way better than most Americans, right? So talk about a little bit about that, about how do
Yeah.
you help them really
Yeah.
embrace?
I love that. I got my master's in human resource development and workforce development. And one of the big things that we talk about is how cultural barriers, not just language barriers, can really cause a drift, or, it may be the thing that prevents you to being able to do good business in the United States. And that goes beyond just the language, and it's not something we really even think about. But the way an email is sent out in Costa Rica or in Guatemala, the way it's written can be so much different to the way you're going to send an email to the VP of a company here in the United States. So it becomes more of like an education journey of like how to better do business in the US, how to
Yeah.
better, communicate with your stakeholders, with your clients, what the ethic is, what the timeline, like in Costa Rica particularly, we sometimes say we're on Costa Rica time. So if a meeting is at 8, we might not get there till 8:45.
Yeah.
And that is not at all how it is in the United States. So I think it's those pieces of cultural like education that we're responsible for as entrepreneurship support organizations of teaching our, Hispanic business owners. So
Yeah.
that can come in multiple forms, with just consulting or workshops or training or, mentorship. But it's really interesting because it does go way beyond just the cultural barrier. So it's trying to understand. For me, I've been here long enough where I know how most American business operates, but I've also lived in Costa Rica long enough to know how Hispanic people, are idiosyncratic, just our kind of like the way we operate is just so different.
It is.
So that's kind of,
It is, yeah. It's funny. I laugh because I take a mission trip to the Dominican Republic with one of my churches that we attended, and
yeah,
their culture is totally different. And we are there to serve them. And it's like, okay, we're going to go build this wall for this house, today. And we're Americans are sitting here going, let's go. And about 7
yeah,
hours later, we've laid the first brick, and we're going, what in the world? But it's culture. And
hmm,
merging those two, and I've seen it happen really, really well, right? I watch these houses go
yeah.
up in my neighborhood. I mean, they are like clockwork. So it definitely can be done, but so many times it takes some initiative from that entrepreneur, but it also takes people from America to understand that there are some barriers, and it's okay,
Yeah,
right?
it is cultural barriers, and that's what, ideally, and this is something that I think our world does a terrible job in, but we don't give each other much grace anymore. So I think that's, that's a big component on both sides, but definitely it's the education, because you can't do business here and expect to do business well the same way you did it in Mexico, Costa Rica, or Guatemala. So I think it takes, it's definitely on both sides, but definitely that's why it's important for organizations like Startup Junkie to provide, our whole thing is democratizing access to everything that
Right.
entrepreneurs need.
Well, and not only that, but I mean, just the legalities of starting an LLC and filing your taxes and doing all those things that really need to be done. That how are you going to build a big business, right? I've got one of my
Mm-hmm.
clients runs an automotive repair shop out in Los Angeles. Started with one
Mm-hmm.
little shop, and now he's got, I don't know, 6 or 8 shops now. He's training other people, and he's Hispanic. He's from Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
He came to this country nothing, and he's built it up. But he's a great business owner because he's had
Mm-hmm.
coaching and mentoring, and he's helped
Mm-hmm.
multiple people start businesses. And that can be the vision when you have somebody like Startup Junkies and Claudia working alongside of you. Fair?
Well, and that can also be the key to unlock good business owners. So, like we kind of mentioned, it's different for them to, being able to reach the right person, reach the right training. But once we're able to provide those services, and I've seen it with clients of mine that, just got here from Honduras or Guatemala. And the first thing is like, okay, let's work on that email you sent me because it's me. I don't care what you sent me, but if you send the exact same thing to someone else, they're not going to like it.
Right.
So, in most people I've noticed, they take it very gladly, like they welcome the feedback. But I think that is the key for them to go from just a regular business that's surviving into thriving. So it's really understanding where you are, your surroundings, the culture you're around, the people you're around. And once we see that be implemented well, can be such a defining factor for our clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In my last church back in Little Rock, there was a guy who came from, I don't know, I want to say Costa Rica, but I don't think that's right. Anyway, yeah, maybe. Anyway,
Maybe Puerto Rico.
his family grew coffee beans. He came to
Could be
America.
Costa Rica, because then we're known for our
You
coffee.
are. I think it was. But anyway, they came and he started a little coffee shop in a trailer, pulled behind trailer, right? And then he parked it on a lot. And now he's working on his building. And all the coffee comes from his family back in there, and that's where the proceeds go because they're building and supporting back there, and it's just got a great feel to it. But he's learned, and he's got business people around him, and that's what I love to see and grow. And his kids are growing up in the business, and they're getting educated, and they're growing.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how you're helping people do this, right? Giving them big
Yeah.
vision.
And we see that, as I have not been at Startup Junkie as long as I would like to, clearly, to implement new programs. But I also direct the Kiva Northwest Arkansas initiative. So those are microloans. They're for anyone that has a business that's growing, but there is definitely a clear emphasis on underserved populations. So we're not only trying to kind of target that Hispanic entrepreneur to just anyone that has been, historically underserved, or, we try to use the word inclusive entrepreneurship. So how can we make our work, our day to day, inclusive to everyone around us in Northwest Arkansas? That
Mm-hmm.
goal clearly might not ever be met 100% because we're not perfect and we can't reach everyone. But every day we got to ask ourselves, what barriers are we putting to our entrepreneurs that we're not seeing because we're privileged, or we can understand the language, or we have transportation, so many different options. And
Yeah.
one of the things that mainly we've seen with the Kiva loan is, previously, if somebody wanted to submit an application for some funding, they had to come into the office. So clearly those are office hours, 8 to 4 or 9 to 5. And then we were not accounting for the people who may not have a car, or may have, a 12-hour job, or doesn't feel comfortable, navigating Northwest Arkansas. So how can we lower those barriers that we've unintentionally put in place 3 or 4 years ago? So now we allow them to do their application from home, or via Zoom, or in
Right.
person. But it's those things that I hadn't even thought about it when I first started in the program. And then we have to really be very intentional when we think about our day and when we think about our procedures, because it might not be perceived as a barrier for someone in corporate, or who has a flexible job or works from home. But what we're not seeing is those different populations that are seeing it as an insurmountable barrier.
Right. Yeah. And all of this, I mean, we could talk for hours because this is really
Yeah.
exciting. I love Startup Junkie and what y'all are doing up there and how you're building bridges for so many people to around the umbrella of entrepreneurship in a variety of ways. Where can people find out? I mean, is the website the best place to go, or where can somebody go to take that next step connecting with you, but also with Startup Junkies and everything they've got going on?
Yeah, so there's multiple ways. So definitely our website, startupjunkie.org, is a big one. We have on the website links to all of our team members' Calendly. So if you see someone that has the expertise or is doing what you are interested in gaining some information, then you can schedule a Zoom with them immediately from the website. I think social media is probably our best way to, be informed of events and things coming up. We have pitch competitions. We have workshops, lunch and learns, and those are most of the time open to, some of them are regional and hyper local, but some of them are open for other states and other areas. So definitely our social media. We're Startup Junkie on everything: Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook.
Excellent.
Kiva Northwest Arkansas, which is kind of like the program that provides the funding, is Kiva NW on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And we also have a Startup Junkies podcast that I know Jeff probably talked about and plugged in on his interview. But in the past, I would say maybe 6 to 8 months, we have started a Startup Junkies in Espanol podcast. So we saw there was just so many business owners in Northwest Arkansas whose primary language is Spanish, and they might speak English, but they don't feel comfortable giving a 45-minute interview in English. And 12 years later, and I still get a little nervous. So we were like, what is the best way for us to provide them a platform the same way we're providing for our English speakers? So we've started a podcast that's doing really well, and you can find those anywhere on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
That's great. And is that just under Startup Junkie, the Spanish
Yes,
podcast?
yes, yes. So we actually we're kind of merging into a podcast network situation.
Good.
So under the Startup Junkies podcast, you'll be able to see the English one, the Spanish one, and we have a business buzz one. That's really fun. But they're just kind of like shorter podcasts with really
Excellent.
interesting guests.
That's awesome. Okay, so in show notes, because she just talked about a bunch of things that we're going to have in there, the primary one, so that you can go and then from the website just branch out, follow them on social media, check out their podcast. That's really cool. Startup Junkies. Just search it, you'll find it, and it's really good. Claudia, thanks for being here. Thanks for exposing me and our audience to what you're doing, to what Startup Junkie is doing to really help entrepreneurship. What's a big word?
It is a
Hispanic
big
speaking
one.
entrepreneurs thrive and really grow and make a bigger impact. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Michael. It really was a pleasure, and I appreciate you having me.